Good afternoon. Welcome to the May 25th Civil Service Commission meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Hatamian.
Here.
Devine.
Here.
Gantis.
Here.
Manukian.
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Gregorian is absent.
He's just walking in, Ms. Torres.
Thank you.
Okay, what's next?
Minutes.
Gentlemen, what's your pleasure?
Yeah, I had one suggestion on it. It reads that the members of the Commission have previously examined the minutes of the meeting of April 13th and requested that the minutes of this date be dispensed with. And I think it meant to say requested that the reading of the minutes of this date be dispensed with and that they be approved as submitted.
Okay. Do we have a motion with those changes?
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Hatamian.
Yes.
Devine.
Yes.
Gantis.
Yes.
Gregorian. Yes. Manukian.
I have to abstain because I was not present at that meeting. Okay, what's next?
Oral communications.
Okay, oral communicate discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. Commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. I see no cards. Anyone in the audience wishes to speak? I see none. What's next?
Eligible list established.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is a note and file item, and it represents the eligible lists that have been established since our last meeting. As you can see from the report, we have 9 lists that have been established. This represents roughly a month of recruitment and testing activity. You have some that are promotional, some that are open. As you can see, the open ones tend to have the higher number of applications, with the largest being a community service officer for our Records Bureau and Police, with 389 applicants. Our staff member, Russ Kwan, did a thorough examination for that, and we ended up with a list of 32. We do have, again, according to this report, the number of applications for each of these exams, and then in the far right column, the number of people who made it through all the various stages of that selection process and onto the list. So with that, again, this is a note and file item for your information only, but if you have questions about any of these, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Okay. Any questions? All right. I see none. What's next?
Reorganization of the Civil Service Commission.
Okay. How do we do this? Do we start with...
Start with a nomination.
Yes, Mr. Gantis.
Chairman, may I have the honor to put into nomination for chairman of this commission a longtime commissioner in the city of Glendale and a semi-long commissioner at the Civil Service Commission, certainly a commissioner that has grown with his position, and I am pleased to put into nomination the name of Art Devine as to be the next chairman of the Civil Service Commission.
Second.
Fantastic. We have a second?
Yes.
I agree with that. Okay. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner.
Yes.
Okay, so you have a nomination. The nominations don't need a second, but if you're ready for the vote, if there are no other nominations, then at this time you'd ask for a motion to vote on that.
Exactly what she said.
So moved.
Now you've got the motion, and I believe the second is coming from Commissioner Gregorian.
But you said we don't need a second, right?
Not to the nomination, but to the motion you do.
Okay. Whatever she said. Do we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Hatamian.
Yes.
Devine.
Yes.
Gregorian.
With pleasure, yes, of course.
Gantis.
I'm still thinking about it, but okay, yes.
Manukian.
Absolutely. And what do we do? Do we switch now?
Now you switch. He's the chairman. You're out.
Okay, fantastic.
Wow, you don't have to be so.
It's all yours,
He's
Dave.
excited.
We should also select a vice chair.
Okay, well, before we do that, I want to thank Mr. Gantis for the nomination. Appreciate the kind words. I also want to thank Mr. Manukian for a great year of leadership. The meetings went very well. They were well organized, and we appreciate all the work you put into it, and thank you very much.
Thank you. It was my absolute honor.
Okay, I think we'll open it up now for a nomination for vice chair. And hearing none, I would gladly nominate a gentleman I've known for a long time, who's been also involved in many city commissions over the years, and I would nominate Commissioner Greg Gregorian for vice chair for this.
Second?
What happened? I'm sorry.
We just nominated Commissioner Gregorian for vice chair.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I understand we don't need a second.
We don't
Oh,
need this.
that's right.
You need a motion.
Move to close nominations and vote.
Okay?
Second to that?
Commissioner Hatamian?
Yes.
Fiducian?
Yes.
We need a second.
We needed
Oh,
a second
we-
to that motion.
Oh,
I moved. You seconded, Sam. Now go for the vote.
All right. God, this is confusing. Go ahead and,
Gregorian?
Yes.
Gantis?
Yes.
Cannot vote for me. I mean,
Sure you can.
Yes, you
yes. We now have a new vice chair, Commissioner
Yes, sir.
Gregorian.
congratulations.
Okay, what is next, please, Sandra?
Class specification for approval, Assistant City Treasurer Series.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is a revision of an existing job classification. This is for the Assistant City Treasurer Series. As we have been doing over the past, say, months and years, trying to update our job descriptions and our job specifications. This is one that has not been updated in about 9 years, and so we're seeking to revise this. Nothing significantly different within this series, but there have been some changes relative to some of the knowledges, skills, and abilities. Some of the outdated language has been removed, and particularly in in the areas of knowledges and skills. There's some key language here about knowledge of banking, which would certainly be helpful in this job. Also, the ability to utilize computers, spreadsheets, and such. This series is actually there's two classifications. There's a deputy and there's an assistant. There's not a great distinction between the two, but typically when someone new is brought into the series, they're brought in at the deputy level, and then as they gain more experience, they receive a promotion to assistant. So with that, again, this revision is here for your review. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. We're honored also to have our esteemed city treasurer, Mr. Ron Barucki, here, as well as Alex Sudo from my staff who worked on the specification. So if you have questions, anything about the specification or about the office treasurer, he'd be happy to try and answer those questions. Mr. Chair?
Do we have any questions from commissioners?
yes, I do have a question. Could I ask Mr. Barucki or you? Yeah.
Depends.
Mr. Barucki, if I may. Sure. It's a point over here which I would like you to clarify, not for me, for the public. Ability to be bonded. So if you can explain that, that would be nice.
Maybe what?
Ability to be bonded, it's one of the qualifications of the knowledge of banking and investment products and services, and it comes down modern computer application and software, and ability to be bonded. Just for some people were asking me, I mean, if they would like to apply for the job, so what does it mean?
Yes, well,
Banking industry and in
maybe Mr. Doyle will be able to help me out here. As I understand it, when I came into the position of city treasurer, the officers in the treasurer's office that are responsible for managing the city's investment portfolio, as well as responsible for managing the city's bank accounts, need to be bonded for, is it liability? Is it for all the bad things that can happen if, in fact, you have someone with a checkered history? And so the underlying qualification is you need someone that can be bonded. So the city will bond them as a precaution, and it just goes with the job. So it's almost as if it's a prerequisite. If an individual can't be bonded, if they've got an arrest record, if they've had, I don't know if it's financial difficulties, I'm not exactly sure what the ramifications are, but in any event, this is a prerequisite for basically working in the city treasurer's office.
Because this position, it will be a second to the command of your position, I mean, after you. Is that correct?
That is correct. The distinction, and I was looking back at my records, the last time I was here was 10 years ago. And the chairman, I'm looking at the faces here. These are all new faces, except for one old face on the end there. And did you
That's
say
an inheritance
old?
face.
Now, Mr. Gantis, as you recall back then,
I have a vivid memory, sir. You had much more hair at that time, as I recall.
that's true. That is true.
None of
You know,
us were born either. So.
Yeah. You know, one of my goals was to leave this job while I still had hair, and obviously I failed on that.
Clearly failed on that.
But back then, Larry Miller was chairman, and you were on it. Roy Coleman, a gal by the name of Nance Bonelli?
Nancy Walker Bonelli.
Nancy Bonelli, and Albert was on, Albert Carrier. I thought you would enjoy my memories.
It's true.
And I appeared because I created this series. I wanted to have the assistant, and the only questions I got were from you. No surprise there. What I'm trying to do here, or what is very important, getting back to your point, Mr. Gregorian, is basically have a distinction with service and experience working under the treasurer, that someone that has the experience and the training can actually step in and manage the portfolio in the absence of the city treasurer, working under the guidelines of the policy. So they know enough to be familiar with basically managing the day-to-day investment portfolio, making the decisions, following the investment plan that the city treasurer had that they had set out, and basically work in his absence or in his or her absence. The deputy works under direction of the city treasurer. When I leave the office, when I had my deputy, and I would leave on vacation for a week or two, that's rare that I ever do take 2 weeks, but when I leave for a week, I leave direction with my deputy as to what it is. I leave parameters. Buy in this range, buy at this level, buy at this amount. Sort of like, this is so that I have a comfort level, because I'm working with someone that is sort of like a junior investment officer. So yes, it becomes very important, and it's a roundabout way of answering your question, but there is responsibility there, and I think it's great responsibility that grows as an individual moves from deputy to assistant.
Thank you. The reason which I'm kind of nervous about this position, not nervous, which I'm worried about, and not even, yeah, there is, how many people? Almost 5 people are working in your, 6 people working.
Still 5.
5. So, and your position is a kind of elected position.
Yes.
So if by any chance during election somebody, like me, I go around, I get, elected for that position, which I don't have any idea about banking or any kind of information about this portfolio. We have about $500-600 million over there, and has to be,
okay.
Generally speaking, I mean, yeah. So we would need, that's a place that I'm kind of come to that we need somebody over there, second in command, that who has this experience and knowledge, that at least to help for the future person, whoever it's going to be. Hopefully we can get a good one, but to be able to manage the city and the financial, the treasury and everything else. Mm-hmm. Could I explain myself where I'm coming from? What is the way that I'm kind of, for this position, I would like to see if we get the best qualified person in that office.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is an elected position, as you say. And so I can do my very best as far as grooming someone in the deputy position or in the assistant treasurer position. That individual isn't going to run, then or decides to run, the position is still available to anyone in the city that really wants to run for the office. That's always the risk. But this is set up that if in fact something would happen to the treasurer, if you've got an assistant there, that individual should be capable of holding the job and performing until such time that just until.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Matt, did you want to add something as far as the bonding? I'm not really sure what
No, Mr.
If that was
Brewster,
a
you
responded-
covered it. I mean, it's the risk that the individuals would be dealing with. We'd want to be sure that they would have the ability to be bonded.
Any other questions? I do have a couple of items for clarification.
Yes.
First of all, I'm confused. You show Assistant City Treasurer on the org chart, and then we mention in the specs a deputy position. Where in this org chart would the deputy fit in?
It's either a deputy or an assistant.
Mr. Chair, if I could explain, as I was alluding to in my introduction, the positions deputy and assistant are similar. And typically what we've done in this organization, when we brought someone new in, we will start them at the deputy. And they will, in fact, be the number two in the office, but needing a lot more guidance and supervision by the treasurer. But once they establish some degree of experience and improve their qualifications and their schooling and whatever it takes, at that point they would be elevated to assistant treasurer. We've never had both filled. It's usually either one or the other.
Okay, so where we
Right.
see the box that says assistant, that in essence could be a deputy.
Oh, yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
And is the position currently filled with a deputy and/or assistant?
Yes,
Which
an assistant.
assistant?
Assistant. Miss Murray has been in that office now for, it's been over 10 years, I believe.
No, actually, no, about a year after this was put in place.
Okay.
We
So-
went out with a solicitation and filled it. And interesting, it's very difficult to find a qualified deputy treasurer. Everybody that was applying wanted to be treasurer. So a lot of people were applying for my position. Very difficult to find a deputy treasurer. Municipalities, as a rule, don't give a lot of attention to the treasurer's office. It's usually very small and doesn't lend itself very nicely or neatly for a progression unless you have a sizable community. And you've got so many small communities in the LA, Orange County metropolis, so many individual communities that are small portfolios, there just isn't a need for a lot of depth or experience or training in the treasurer's office.
I can tell you your office will be noticed when you do some investments to fill the $18 million budget gap this year. So we're looking to you to take care of that for us, Mr. Murphy.
I was startled listening to the fire chief's comments about the paramedic program, and it loses more than the city portfolio in a year that the city portfolio generates in income. Truly an amazing number. Anyhow.
Okay, any further?
I do have one question for, I guess it's whoever can answer it, Mr. Doyle, hopefully. The minimum requirements that are listed on this class specification, are they for the deputy city or the assistant city treasurer?
Commissioner Hatamian, the minimum requirements are starting on page 1 and 2. Those are intended to cover both positions. Those are the baseline requirements. And then once you get into essentially the third page of this specification, it gets a little more specific as to what each individual classification requires. And it generally builds from the lower position to the more experienced or higher level position. So again, all of those knowledges, skills, and abilities are to cover both positions within the series.
So is it safe to say that somebody with this minimum requirements, if so long as they have 4 years or 5 years of experience within a city treasurer's office, can apply for the assistant city treasurer position?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And so my question to you, sir, is that amount of experience sufficient for assistant city treasurer? 5 years of experience and with the minimum requirements that are listed on this page with a bachelor's degree in finance?
Yes.
It's a good question.
And so the only difference between, in your take, the only difference between a deputy city treasurer and an assistant city treasurer is about 3 years of experience, however, the same minimum requirements and the same degree.
And then working for me.
So 3 years of experience.
Under your leadership.
No, and then the number of years working for me.
Because from what I see on here is the deputy city treasurer needs 2 years of experience and the minimum requirements that are listed in here. and then the assistant city treasurer needs 5 years of experience, but the same amount of
Right.
minimum requirements.
Right.
So I understand that there is a 3-year experience difference between the deputy versus the assistant city.
Right. And as
That's not true.
no?
There's 3 years. The 5 years has to include 2 years in a position of deputy city treasurer or its equivalent. to be
Okay,
the
so then my question towards Matt, originally Mr. Doyle, was whether or not somebody who has 5 years of experience with the minimum requirements that are listed here, would they be able to apply for the assistant city treasurer?
Commissioner Hatamian, as long as they meet the experience requirements, and if you finish the whole paragraph there, it does say 5 years increasingly responsible experience. The last sentence of that says 2 years of this experience must be at the level of deputy city treasurer with the city of Glendale or equivalent. So if we were to go open this up to the outside, we would look for a deputy or an assistant from some other jurisdiction, or if we had somebody internally at the deputy level who'd been in that job 2, 3, 4 years, they would be considered as well.
So they would be considered if they're outside?
Yes.
Outside of Glendale?
If we were filling this position. But as we said earlier, this position is filled, and we are simply updating the specification. We're not doing this for any reason other than to get our specification more in tune with current needs.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification. And then with the degree still stays the same, right?
Yes.
Between the two positions?
Absolutely.
Minimum, we're looking for a bachelor's.
Yes.
Okay. No other questions?
Okay, if no further questions, do we have a motion?
Move to approve?
A second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Hatamian?
Yes.
Nukian?
Yes.
Gregorian?
Yes.
Gantis?
Yes.
Devine.
Yes, and may we have the next item, please, Sandra?
Class specification for approval, Facilities Management Administrator.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is a specification for a new classification that has recently been brought forth both to the City Council and now to this body. This is a position called Facilities Management Administrator. And this is actually quite an exciting development. What's being done here is as a budgetary consolidation, but it's actually a very smart consolidation. Currently we had two different sections within the Public Works Department, one entitled Project Management, which dealt with really the both major and minor building and construction projects in and around the various city facilities. And we also have a position or a section of facilities maintenance, which deals with minor construction projects, building maintenance, repairs, custodial services, and such. And what Mr. Zern, who's the Director of Public Works, has proposed is to consolidate those two departments, because we happen to have a vacancy at the level of the Project Management Administrator within Public Works. And his proposal was to consolidate those two departments and instead of having two separate administrators, combine it into one. This proposal will save, I think we estimated about $135,000 to the city, and really makes a very logical alignment of the two sections, which both deal with building facilities, building repairs, and various projects, mainly are in and around the city hall area here. So that's the purpose of this classification. This individual will now be the head of both the project management section as well as the facilities maintenance section, combined into one position. So with that, that's sort of the background. The specification is here for your review. Has the definition, essential functions, and minimum requirements. And I'll leave it to you, Mr. Chair, if you have any questions on this. We do have Mr. Zern is here today to answer any questions. Also, Steve Nersessian, who is my HR analyst working with Public Works. Be happy to try and answer any questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Do we have any questions from the Commission?
Move to approve?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Hatamian?
Yes.
Nukian?
Yes.
Gantis?
Yes.
Gregorian,
Yes.
Devine.
Yes.
And I would like to add congratulations to Mr. Zern and HR that by combining these two positions, we are going to have some saving for the city. In the meantime, your department is doing such a good job in the city, throughout the city, so we would like to thank you.
Okay. And we have the next item, please.
Report on minor modifications to class specifications.
And do we go to Mr. Doyle or Ms. Varpetian for that?
Should go to Ms. Varpetian.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, there was an inquiry on the February 3rd, 2011 meeting regarding whether minor changes to class specification required approval by the Commission. This references Civil Service Rule 2, Section 3, which requires Commission approval for each type or kind of classification in the classified service. At the time when the issue came up, it had to do with the title change of a certification for a building inspector. I believe the change was from ICBO to ICC, and it was a change that occurred outside of the city. There was no manner by which the city could impact that change. It didn't change the requirements of the certification. It was just a straight-through title change. And the inquiry was made to save the Commission some time and maybe streamline some of the issues that the Director of Human Resources can handle. And what we looked at was whether or not there were some ministerial acts that were within the purview of the Director of Human Resources. Sorry about that. The law defines ministerial acts as those where the public employees have no discretion whatsoever and instead have a legal duty to do something and to do it only one way. An example of this, the most common example of this, is the issuance of permits where they are done as a ministerial act without any discretion on the part of the employee. We certainly viewed this change to be akin to that. There was no discretion on the part of the Director of Human Resources as it related to this title change to the certification. And we thought that probably the best way to handle that would be through a courtesy notification to the Commission so that you are still aware when changes occur, but that it didn't need to come back to the Commission for full action. If through that notification you found that you really wanted to have that item brought back for further discussion, at that point you can request it. We can certainly agendize it and bring it back for further discussion. And that concludes my report.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much. I think it's a very comprehensive report, and it certainly answered the question that was brought up. I'll turn to my colleagues and see if they have any questions, and then I do have a follow-up after that. Any of my colleagues have any concerns or questions about putting this process into existence? Hearing none, I will...
Sorry, I was going to say, I'd be curious to see what Mr. Gantis, based on his previous experience on these issues, do you see an issue with that?
No, I think what she's saying basically, one of a couple of the ones that have come have been like changes in licensing agencies or the post-testing, I think, changed to the past testing or something. Those are ministerial. I have an overall, I just think by the time you do one, you do the other. It would be better always to go through the Commission, but in this case, it probably works out fine. And again, if somebody is concerned about it, it's going to be on a notification and can't come back to us.
I would ask, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. I was going to ask then, with that in mind, what would be the process or the procedure, let's say when the next one comes up and there's a minor change? Is that something that Mr. Doyle could just on his own evaluate? Maybe if there's a question, go through your office and then go ahead and approve it? Absolutely.
Chair Devine, members of the Commission, that would be the proper process. There's no formal action that needs to be taken by the Commission, either today or at some future meeting. If there is, which is, the definition of it is that it's something that he can act upon routinely, and there's really only one way to act upon it, and because that's the case, then he could certainly do that and then notify you, and there's no formal action that you would need to take to formalize this process.
Do we need to say anything about that we do accept the process or would like to put it in place, or will it just be automatically if we note and file this report?
That would be the case. I mean, certainly if you want to take action on that, you can, but I do believe it's listed as an action item. Yes. So if you did want to take action on that, you could, but we're not hearing any objection to the proposed change. So.
Well, then let's say by unanimous consent that the Commission will ask Mr. Doyle to take on this responsibility pursuant to Ms. Farpetian's report.
Certainly.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Chair. And I just want to say, initially when this came up, I had the same sort of reaction as Mr. Gantis. But I want to assure you that any type of discretion that I would employ in this area, I would certainly not abuse that privilege. And I think most of you know me well enough to know that if there's ever any doubt as to what needs to come before Commission as far as any substantive changes, I would certainly make sure that that occurs, and obviously that you're notified of that. As Ms. Farpetian was writing this legal opinion, I was trying to come up with some other examples of how we would, how this would come about ever again, and again, other than minor title change or something like that, I really can't imagine this occurring very often. But you never know, what may come up. But again, I want to assure you, I would not abuse the privilege. And again, anytime anything like this comes up where we do make that decision, I think the safeguard by bringing it to your attention by notification would work well. And if you have concerns, you can tell me that, and we can agendize it for the next meeting. But otherwise, this would give me a little bit of a free hand in handling some of these more perfunctory activities as they come up. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Ms. Farpetian. Again, excellent report. Appreciate that. Okay, may we have the next item, please?
Agenda forecast.
Mr.
Doyle?
Chair, again, our next meeting, June 8th, as of now, and I think due to the holiday, we probably won't have a large number of items on the open agenda. However, we are anticipating the preliminary decision on one of your hearings, and so we're setting that date aside for deliberations on that case. As I understand, Mr. Potter will be here, and we can again properly notice that meeting and have that occur on the 8th. On June 22nd, I think one of the next items, the closed session item, we'll probably be moving that one on another disciplinary case to the 22nd. So for now, that's really all we have, or all that I'm aware of for our upcoming meetings.
Okay.
Mr. Devine, I'll probably not be here the 22nd, and I'm pretty sure I won't be here the 13th as well. So if that governs anything, you make that note.
With that in mind, Mr. Doyle, I'm wondering, and you mentioned that on the 22nd there may be a new disciplinary action coming forth to the Commission. I know that you have a time frame in which they must be presented to the Commission, but I'm wondering if on those two dates we could arrange not to have any disciplinary actions come to us with Mr. Gantis not here.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, unless you get the consent of both parties, there's a requirement that a hearing be commenced within 5 days. Is it?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, which is why we really have meetings every 2 weeks. 2 weeks of filing the appeal. We have a stipulation to go till the 22nd. Our idea of opening the hearing, as you know, Mr. Devine, is basically setting dates, setting who it is, just doing the groundwork, which can be done unless if we instruct Mr. Doyle to go back, I can't imagine, but maybe they will, the attorneys would disagree to have a further continuance. If they agree to it, it can be done. Otherwise, it has to be heard on that day.
Again, that would be up to the parties involved.
All right, well then, let's leave it as it is rather than get into new problems with the parties. So we'll just leave that as it is. Okay, may we have the next item, please?
Has to employ performance evaluations from May 11th.
Ask Mr. Gaddis to enlighten us on that issue.
So we have no past dues from the city manager's office, the city treasurer's office, the finance office, the fire department, the Glendale Water and Power, human resources, and public works. We are really still doing very well. We're slipping a little bit, but there are a lot of special circumstances, I think, that have made this a little bit difficult. And we know what a lot of those special circumstances are. Generally resolve around either actual or possible disciplines. So we have to be a little bit flexible on that. I think we're still doing great on those.
Okay, thank you very much.
I will point out our esteemed city clerk did take care of his late performance evaluations.
Yes.
It's been very busy the last few weeks. Post-election, taking care of that. So we're partially out of the woods there.
Okay, on the next item.
Civil Service Commission and our staff comments.
Are there any comments from commissioners? Oh, Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, I do want to once again congratulate you for your appointment as chair, and also to thank former Chair Manukian for his year of leadership as the chairman of the Civil Service Commission. I think he did a really good job of developing camaraderie within this body and keeping the meetings moving along well and making things very efficient and productive. So I thank you for that, sir.
Thank you. It was my pleasure working with everyone.
Okay. No further comments. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Chair, do we need to indicate that there was a closed session item which is being postponed upon agreement by all the parties on that? So
To June 22nd,
June
2011.
22nd, yes.
Okay, we stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.